John Spencer is the executive director of the Urban Warfare Institute. He is also the co-author of Understanding Urban Warfare. He's joining us on. John, really appreciate your time. I've read your blog on Operation Sindoor and you have called it a decisive Indian victory in modern warfare. In your view, what were the primary strategic objectives of Operation Sindoor and how were they achieved? And let me ask an additional question to my first question. In what ways do you think India's response to the Pahalgam terror attack of 22nd April differed from its previous responses to similar terrorist incidents?
Sure, it's a great question. As somebody who studies war all around the world, it often is hard for people to understand what victory looks like. For Operation Sindoor, the objectives, of course, were a response to a terrorist attack on a sovereign nation. So, of course, the goal was to establish an immediate response to reestablish deterrence. So that's why in Operation Sindoor, their first goal, and this is where it's hard for people to understand what are all the political objectives. In war or under attack, it makes it hard for people to assess. But from my analysis, the immediate goal was, of course, respond to the attack, send a clear message that any such attacks will be stiffly responded to, which is an objective in of itself. And this is what India did with its immediate response within days, not weeks, months, within days, hitting the 9 terrorist camps attributed to this awful terrorist attack on Indian soil. But then the Pakistan military responded with a drone attack. So then that changes the political goal, which is, okay, now I need to deter not just a terrorist organization, which is backed by the state of Pakistan, to be clear, but also to deter a nation. So that changed, which is also normal in war, the goals. So the objective then becomes deterring basically a nuclear armed nation, which is really, very complex to do. But I think India did that. It showed overwhelming military superiority in that goal to deter not just a terrorist, but the nation of Pakistan's military and government, basically showing military superiority of I can hit any target in Pakistan at will, and you can't hit any target here, but I'm going to be very discriminate on what I'm targeting, as in for India, which explains the control, demonstrating overwhelming military force, but also the ability to do what's necessary to achieve your political goal. But lastly, I think that this operation established a new doctrine that signals to both terrorists and their nation state backers that India has a new doctrine that it will immediately respond. It will not be put under nuclear blackmail. It will immediately respond with overwhelming force to any attack and basically investing in its own security. You asked me about how this compared to like 2019 or what I've studied in a lot of detail, 2008. I've walked the ground of the Mumbai attacks, and surprisingly, after the Mumbai attacks where 166 people were killed, India's response was very on the political aspect, seeking international condemnation, international sanctions, things like that. And there wasn't a real military response. So this is why this is really a new Indian doctrine of, look, we'll use all forms of national power to secure our nation, but we'll also immediately respond, I don't care who you are, to attacks.
You have used a phrase, military superiority. So let me ask you, how did India demonstrate that military superiority and strategic independence during this entire operation? And since you spoke about Prime Minister Narendra Modi unveiling a new security doctrine, how does it reshape India's approach to cross-border terrorism and, of course, the larger world?
Yeah, I mean, this is really, we say it in America lately, but I really believe it, peace through strength. So one is, deterrence, which is, at the national level. Deterrence is somebody doesn't do something against you because they fear the consequences. So deterrence requires capability and the will to do it. India demonstrated overwhelming military superiority when it struck the first 9 terrorist sites with very precisely the targets they wanted to hit without interruption. Then when the Pakistan military sent a drone swarm to Indian civilian areas and military sites, India responded with military action against military targets like radars and air defense systems without any interruption, without the loss of, despite the misinformation of Indian military capabilities. That's an overwhelming demonstration, one of the ability to hit any target it wants in Pakistan at will, despite Pakistan's Chinese air defense systems, but also India protected its sites. So that's the other demonstration of superiority is when Pakistan sent capabilities towards India, not one of them hit their intended target. That's overwhelming military superiority. And you're right. I say one of the goals here was India establishing its independence as a very powerful nation when it got to the point within 4 days where Pakistan's asking for a ceasefire. It didn't seek international United Nations or anybody else's help in responding to the attack or achieving this peaceful end, which is, look, we've shown you what we can do. If you want to continue to escalate, which nobody wants to see, that level of national really clarity in operations, even against a nuclear armed state, which is like the nuclear saber rattling that we see around the world. Like just because people have nuclear weapons, nobody wants nuclear war, but doesn't mean you get to send waves of terrorist attacks, which isn't even proxy warfare. They're coming from Pakistan. They're backed by Pakistan forces. That independence, that clarity in what will happen if this continues is really unique in nations. So that's another one of the strategic goals achieved by India here is what, beyond the military superiority, the Indian government and Prime Minister Modi made it pretty clear in his recent statements, is independent and they will respond immediately, but very controlled.
You have also said that post 26/11 Mumbai terror attacks, you were in India, you were in Mumbai to be specific. There has been a visible shift in the Modi era, particularly whenever there has been a terror attack. We know what happened post Uri, post Pulwama, and now post Pahalgam.
Yeah, it's a great question. And that, war is not just military capabilities, but it's also political will to achieve the goals. Absolutely, you can see just in the last few years an immense investment in Indian, especially Indian-made, Indian-produced military capabilities. But the ultimate test is war, and that's why even in the initial response, this test was a test of war and India's military capabilities. And that investment, recent investment under Prime Minister Modi, has shown to be effective, but it's also about the will to respond. Now, comparing 2008 to 2025 is really hard because globally there are, shifts, but clearly India is at the front against global terrorism. I'm a hawk when it comes to terrorism. It shouldn't be accepted anywhere in the world. After the 2008 attacks, of course, the world was different. India was different. That's why I want to call out, this is a new India that's not prepared for last war, but is actually prepared for the next war through immense amount of strength in military investments, and their technology showed to be superior, but also in political will, which is really hard to come by. There's a lot of risk in responding in any type of action, but there is also wisdom in that response if you know how to show the political will, but be constrained in the military action, but that is continuing to invest in your own national security, which is very important.
John, in your blog, you say that India was not fighting for vengeance, it was fighting for deterrence, and it worked. Is it really a deterrent here? Because you are dealing with a neighbor which fights through proxies. Although India did manage to communicate to the world rather effectively that outfits in Pakistan are inseparable from ISI and army because of the sheer presence of the Pakistani generals and senior officials of the administration during the funerals of terrorists who were killed in these strikes by India.
Yeah, no, I think that's one. This is where you get a lot of commentators that want to talk about revenge, vengeance, and that's, a sovereign free nation, democratic. I mean, that's not the way they operate. They operate within the laws of war, which is really hard for people to understand. Absolutely, deterrence is the way to achieve peace, and that's what non-terrorist, especially India, wants. They want peace. They want Pakistan to stop backing terrorists to attack India to pursue its goals, whether that's in Kashmir or just against India in general. That's really important to call out. But that doesn't mean that this is the last phase. This is basically a line in the sand for India saying the old, basically rules of the game are no longer in place. You're not going to send terrorists and arm and fund and train and send them into India for attacks. That's really important, but this is where you have to understand what were the goals of Operation Sindoor, what are the goals of India going forward, and that's why I think this is one of the few decisive operations of modern times. There are a few, maybe one other that I can think of, that shows clear goals, but also establishing a new doctrine, which isn't the end of the overall war against terrorism emanating out of Pakistan. And that's not just India's problem. That's the world's problem, and how they have allowed this to build, and the policies within the Pakistan government and the military that has been allowed to continue for various reasons. That's important to keep in mind when we start assessing what did India do? What is India's goals in this operation? Of course, its goals is peace.
Okay, a couple of questions to you. You've called it a comprehensive victory for India. Can you think of any parallels that are close to what India achieved both on the diplomatic and the military front in a fortnight of operations?
Not at that speed. No, not at 4 days, not with that level of superiority. The only other case, when I call something decisive, it has a very strong definition of somebody who teaches war. Decisive means it achieves the strategic goals for either side. And the only other parallel is the 2022 Battle of Kyiv, when Russia tried to take the nation of Ukraine and they failed to do that. So that was a decisive defeat. But no, there's no parallel in just 4 days of being able to achieve strategic goals like this so decisively as India has.
My last question to you, John. Many are questioning the timing of the ceasefire. India has maintained that it was sought from Pakistan. And of course, it came after Pakistanis felt the brunt of Indian military right inside, destroying the air bases. Did it come too soon, the ceasefire, or was it the right thing to do?
No, I think personally, my assessment is, basically restraint is not weakness. India showed overwhelming strength and sent a clear message. Now, whether the terrorists or the Pakistan military or the Pakistan government received that message, I think that the operation, this is what goes until you achieve your goal. And I wrote about this in some of the articles I've written recently, where I've seen voices, to include on NDTV, say, you shouldn't have stopped, you should have gone for a bigger goal. That's where you start to get into strategic, basically, mismatch of what the goal is versus what you're doing, the ways and means. I think India stopped exactly when they believed the message had been received, because the Pakistan government was reaching out looking for an off-ramp, and India provided it. So that's immense strength, in my opinion, of showing that you achieved your goal. We'll see where this goes, and I think that's important about whether this is a ceasefire or just a halt. And for me, I saw that message to the Indian military of course, you can respond to any attack that happens right now, which is important. No, I think they stopped exactly at the moment when they achieved the goal at this time.
All right, John Spencer, really appreciate your time here on NDTV. John Spencer, the Executive Director of the Urban Warfare Institute. Thank you for joining us here on NDTV.